Hey guys, it's Matt. About 45 seconds or less before I read chapter 25 of the still unnamed reality book. The Puppet Show channel on Brighteon and Odyssey will be available in a few days. There won't be any truth or any reality discussions, just puppet shows like the scenes from The Sound of Music. Also, about 20% of what I'm about to present here is a complete rework of the graduated Animal Farm section that I did do in the last book. But it is so essential to understanding how this whole reality is structured to keep people away from the final truth. It is necessary to be in this book. And anybody that would say, Matt, you've talked about that before, like the person that got on me for talking about Jupiter ascending. Yeah, I know I've talked about it before. But if it's an absolute core element as to how this not-nilk reality lays down its trick, it has to be in the final definitive book on reality. And it's not arrogant to say that's what it is, because it's not from me. Half of it might be from me, but the other half from you guys. I talk about Tony a lot, who has unique insights, but I mean, how many thousands of comments and emails have shaped my understanding? People saying, Matt, let me tell you how this works. I mean, it's half of it is from you guys. I just am good at putting it all together with a few jokes and a few puppet shows. And last thing, very quickly, I understand why people are confused about this. There are two Tonys. It's not the same person. How could somebody have such insight, Matt? They'd be so dumb. One Tony is an old friend of mine from, say, 6th or 7th grade. He believes every bit of what CNN is reporting about the Gaza Strip. The other Tony I met somewhat recently, he sees through everything and is communed with his higher self. But what are the chances the person that I mentioned, or the two people that I mention quite often, both named Tony, the dichotomy of them being on opposite sides of the sliding scale of ignorance? I don't think this sort of thing is a coincidence, guys. And I hear somebody saying to me right now, that one more Tony in your life, it would be like the band from the late 80s, Tony, Tony, Tony. Tony, Tony, Tony has done it again, but the spelling of each Tony is different if you forget that incredible band. Let's start chapter 25. We who can see are almost always isolated in our social groups. How our life plays out for people like you and me seems too common for it not to be an intentional part of our life experience. In most family groups, there's only one person who can see how the world works. In most groups of friends, there's usually only one individual who can see through the bozo show or comprehend the outer ring or trickster. This is a strange phenomenon that applies about 95% of the time, in my opinion. Of course, there are a few exceptions once in a while, but they're rare. On a few occasions, I've been told by, say, a husband that both he and his wife can see, or vice versa. But if that's the case, they're typically surrounded like General Custer in a zombie movie, just like the rest of us. If both a husband and a wife can see, then their entire family, just like yours, fully believes in the screen and its ministry of information. Families bicker about who's going to vote for the Democrats and who's going to choose Republican in the next election. And they never see the big picture that politics itself is a ruse. Those of us who can see without the they live glasses sit at the Thanksgiving table quietly in frustration as we listen to the pointless bickering with the spouting of talking points that each family member has received from Fox News and MSNBC respectively. It is unfathomable to us how anybody who can tie their shoes in 2023 can still believe in politics. Building a cow dung snowman in July has more utility than a Western polling place. What a coincidence that the United States is always split exactly down the middle, with just a few seats in Congress transferring all the perceived power back and forth. And for presidential elections, they make it so close that you don't even get the results that night. They got this genius idea back with Bush Gore. Oh, you're going to have to wait. Hanging chads, recounts. They just did it with Biden. The next morning, there were people up the block who, when they announced, they went out with pots and pans cheering. I guess they're very embarrassed at this point as to what they did. You have to wait. It's so close. The country's right down the middle. Oh, sure. If it appears to be WWE wrestling, then it is WWE wrestling. But people like my uncle tell me, Matt, if you want things to change, we have to win more Republican elections. Oh, I see. Then all my problems will be solved. In the United States, at least, elections are so evenly divided between red and blue, between the donkey and the elephant. every election cycle that crazies like us have the audacity to suggest to the people around us that some funny business is going on. We say, look, there's men jumping off the top ropes. They're wearing tights and Mexican wrestling masks. And see, if it looks like that, it actually is fake wrestling. And our families say, no, Matt. These bouts are legitimate. Why do you think it's fake? It makes perfect sense to the people around us that no candidate for decades can ever just be generally likable to most people. Matt, one goes out to vote, not for somebody they like, of course, but because they hate the other side. Don't you know that? That's what it's become, yet people think that's normal, and we're crazy. 95% of the U.S. population should have abandoned politics over 45 years ago after the election of Jimmy Carter. In 1976, millions of people should have woken up one morning in November and said, that's it, I've seen enough. There's no way a man like that could be elected president of anything, even the president of his Dungeons and Dragons club in his middle school. I'm done with this political horse shit. Then the next president, after that peanut brain, came from Hollywood and started a movie with a monkey. Hundreds of millions of people should have walked away for good about 45 years ago. Even if the voting is real, it doesn't matter if the voting's real. On the ballot, they put forth their two pre-approved puppets. It's a restaurant menu with both of their favorite foods. Maybe they actually do count votes and put in the side dish that people actually selected. What does that matter? The Empire runs the same if Darth Sidious wins over Darth Vader or Darth Maul. All serve the same not-milk empire, and the new Death Star is going to be built either way. For example, if Mitt Romney would have won and sent Obama back to the streets of Indonesia, nothing of any consequence would have come out of it. Sure, they would have made a few small changes to government to make the Republican voters believe that their party's actually legitimate, but that's all that would have happened. Sure, Obama would be denied a second term, with him being back in Jakarta in his old job, assistant dog catcher, but everything else that happened in this country since 2012 would have still followed the same exact script. What did Trump do that Hillary would not have done? I'm still waiting for that swamp to be drained. Just a few months into his cake-in-the-lake presidency, Trump was handed his cue cards and got up on his soapbox to complain about a staged event in Syria, just as Hillary would have done. The Trump election was the final straw for many people who were still holding out a tiny little bit of hope that some of it may be real. In 2016, something we knew that was 99% fake went to 100%. Trump, the outsider, was going to drain the swamp and end corruption, while championing freedom and restoring the Bill of Rights. Heck, if he would have even fixed one token thing, we may have been quite pleased in his presidency, restored one major freedom. He was elected and then proceeded to do squat. Absolutely nothing. Nothing he said he was going to do. He didn't even build that graffiti-laden wall below Texas. And that was his main promise to his supporters. As alluded to earlier, one of the first major things that happened during the Trump presidency, the Syria-Assad nerve gas story, that was 100% cake in a lake. See, the swamp can't be drained right away because lives have to be saved. In Syria, we need to get in there. They told him, let's run our same old script, that a dictator is killing his own people. Every dictator you see will eventually succumb to that insatiable craving to kill their own people. But I'm talking about evil dictators in this world killing their own people. And then the United States, of course, has to go in and rescue the people. What do you think Trump did when they put those same old cue cards in his hands? They didn't even write up new cue cards. They were old dusty old cue cards. Maybe he pushed back a bit. He said, you want me to read this? This is the same comic book we just printed. Just say it. The American people, they'll lap it up. They take this bait every time. We've got to go stop the evil dictators. In my opinion, the group of low-level minions that cause all these problems around the world, the evildoers, the Idi Amins of the world, the Assads, the Saddam Husseins, they're used by Not Milk. I don't think they have any understanding of what is going on and how their strings are pulled, how they're set up to create certain situations. Heck, if you see a Western president, prime minister, premier on television, I don't think they have a real understanding of not-nilk at that low level. Yeah, like the assistant ski instructor in Canada, he doesn't have a clue as to what's going on. George H.W. Bush may have known a little bit more. Bill Clinton, I mean, he could barely play a saxophone. They're puppets. They have handlers. They push cue cards into their hands. They just show up at the White House and where do I go today? What do I do? And they're paraded around. That's all it is. It's like the scene in The Sound of Music. They were the puppet show, the little sheep. The lonely goat, the lay, lo. That's, I'm telling you, a prime minister, premier, or assistant ski instructor in Canada is literally no different than that scene in The Sound of Music. When Trump, Trudeau, or even Truman walked through the door of the respective state houses on their first day on the job, somebody came up to him and handed him a little card with a phone number on the back, and it said, "Call here for your instructions, little man." The facade of politics goes back a lot longer than we would want to admit. This screen or system has been here a long time, perhaps back to reality's original creation. The universe is certainly not the 12 to 13 billion years old that scientists say it is. It may be more like 12,000 years old. As usual, reality gives itself away. George Washington laid down the first stone, which began the construction of Washington, D.C. in the late 1700s. The creeps made sure that the stars were in their perfect astrology before that stone was laid down. Then after he passed, just a few years later, they honored him with the obelisk or the phallus penetrating the vesica Pisces, the vagina. Yes, folks, there's some weird-ass shit going on in this reality. But if you can see it, you're one of those people. Per the opening discussion we were having 10 minutes ago, your friends and family can't even see the stuff that's right in their face. The trajectory of government never changes under any new president that wins an election. No liberty is ever restored by any of these creeps, because it was never granted in the first place to you great unwashed. We now understand presidents have no real power and are simply puppets of larger interests, who themselves are puppets of what we call the outer ring of reality, or the screen. And as a reminder, class, Stoltzfus and Lapp, put those spitballs down back there. What's the purpose of all of it? From the screen down through presidents to the lowly minions of the not-nilk. The same two sentences to block your spiritual journey. So you spiritually whack yourself off in this reality and don't do what you're supposed to do. That's it. 2 sentences. The last thing in the world that the not-nilk wants a real person to do is to walk away and leave it all behind, to actually distance their heart-centered reality bubble from the outer screen. That's why it constantly draws you back. Worry about yourself is not selfish. It's the only way to navigate this reality, to give your spiritual self what it needs out of your life and your incarnation. And yeah, of course I'm going to do it. Some people are like, I don't like it when you do that. I don't care if you like it when I do it or not. You'll remember it, won't you? Worry about worry about yourself. It's not selfish. If you think it's your job to go out with your pickup truck army and fix the ills of society by winning more elections, maybe as my uncle would say, in any way to protest it and go, I'm going to bring this system down and go, that's exactly the game it wants you playing. We know this now 100%. What it doesn't want is worry about yourself and a withdrawal. So we know what we're doing and what we have to do, but just for a fun reminder, let's look at somebody on the opposite end of the fooled spectrum. Let's just do this for a few minutes. There are actually still a few pickup trucks driving around Pennsylvania, where I live, with Trump flags on metal poles welded into the bed. I'm not even joking. One can barely fathom the psychosis of these people, waiting for Trump to come back again and save them. Why didn't Trump do it in his first 4 years? I want to run up to their window at a red light, knock on the window, or knock right on the glass, right in their face, and ask, "What's wrong with your brain, sir? Why are you so in love with this man who did nothing in his first 4 years for you? Do you have lingering effects from a head injury, sir? Please, no. Please don't reach for your concealed weapon in your glove box. Hear me out, man. Roll that window down and tell me one thing he did for you when he was in office. Name one freedom that was restored. What part of the swamp was drained? What part of Obamacare was dismantled? Dude in your John Deere hat, Do an accounting for me of what Trump gave you and your concealed carrying friends. Here's what you were given: a cake in a lake capital invasion, a virus, and a cooked-up event in Syria. Nothing happened in his 4 years, except another Jared Kushner you-know-what type of party that I have to talk about in a roundabout manner. Nothing that was promised was delivered. Now what can you possibly be expecting in a second term, you jackass? To conclude the scene that's playing out, I've now left his window because the driver has reached his breaking point with me. I'm now running across the street toward a grove of sycamore trees. This Trump supporter has, in fact, leaned over and reached into his glove box and is now charging a .45 caliber 1911 handgun. Thank goodness he did not keep a round in the chamber, as most of these types of people do. Fortunately, I'm able to slip away before he fires. The light changes to green, and the cars behind him begin to honk, so he tosses his hand cannon on his passenger seat and drives away as his Trump flag flaps back and forth in the wind. My Democratic neighborhood is appalled. Part 2. The reality is masterfully organized into what I call graduated animal farms, and it has used them to perfectly organize its various herds of sheep. For each level or grade that somebody gets to in terms of seeing how the world works, reality then pairs them with a provider of bogus information to keep them stuck in the mud. Like magic, reality provides a source of news and research that will keep each member of each herd satisfied depending on their own perceived level of understanding. For example, the watchers of Rachel Maddow on MSNBC think they're getting the truth, while at the same time, the Glenn Beck followers believe they're getting the truth. Glenn and Rachel seem like polar opposites of each other, but they're not. One is called liberal Democrat and one neocon Republican. But where it matters, they each do the exact same thing for the not-milk system. Each graduated animal farmer cements the notion to the herd that the system of politics itself is real. That's all that matters. That the system itself is believed in. The dark reality needs that before all else in order to keep siphoning off the energy it needs. It takes the biggest bites it can get away with without compromising that critical tenet, to be believed in. It has many tactics to ensure that the people trust the legitimacy of its foundation. Its simplest play in its playbook is to strengthen one's own side by making the other side out to be a villain. It knows that if it can piss people off to hate the opposing party, those in that state of mind will never question the foundation of the house itself. They hate the other side too much to realize that the entire thing is a ruse, and they have too much invested over too many decades to ever train a critical eye. This is why there will never be a candidate, again, who is generally liked by everybody. Even if somebody might not vote for him, somebody, well, he's a pretty good guy on that other side, but I'm still going to vote Republican. That will never happen again. Someone like Glenn Beck is an expert at exposing the bad actors of this world, like Larry Silverstein and George Soros. And that part of his presentation is actually very real. That is truth the Not Milk is happy to give away to those who care to investigate such things. I'm sure it's generally true what Glenn says about George Soros' nonprofits being a funding source for all sorts of riots and chaos. They'll gladly give that stuff away. We were meant to find those breadcrumbs linking Soros to Ferguson, Missouri, and those riots, things like that. All things given away. Real information, but stuff that gets people nowhere after they investigate it. This is a major graduated animal farm tactic. If what is being said links these bad actors to conspiracy, the Not Milk knows nobody outside of Glenn Beck's own audience will believe what's being presented. Most graduated animal farms provide a lot of truth, but all hide the ultimate, final truth of this reality because they don't know it themselves. Getting people to believe that the Not Milk systems are legitimate is job number one for them. For that reason, you'll never hear somebody like Glenn Beck's question anything to do with voting, for example, for that attacks the very foundation of the system itself. So you see the general tactic here. It's point at the bad actors who really are bad actors, but then it's just people, it's just corruption. Never point at the underlying foundation of what's holding up the fake bridge. Each graduated animal farm presents breaking news and at least some real information about how the world works. What is given out is matched to the level of the people watching, so they don't go looking for higher truths off the farm. Here's a simple but accurate phrase. Liberalism is a mental disorder. It's literally a psychosis of some kind. So the news and stories presented by MSNBC's Rachel Maddow matches the schizophrenia of her patients watching. That group will never be dissatisfied with what is being aired about the government because there's something wrong with somebody who begs for more enslavement. Conservative people are far more normal than Democrats. Conservatives need to be managed by the Not Milk with a greater degree of skill. Most conservatives don't believe the regular news outlets are giving them the entire story, and this is blamed on liberal bias. I bought into that for years myself. The notion of liberal bias is there to protect the foundation of the system itself. It tells you, you see, it's not fake news per se. The system itself is very sound, very good and just. It's just that people can't keep their own political ideologies out of it, so it's liberally biased. Blame it on the people, not the system. This Republican or conservative audience is actually capable of some critical thinking and has the tendency to search for more truth over time. So their farmers need to be far more skilled to keep them satisfied in their pens. Again, being conservative is a much more normal trait in a human being than being a democratic lunatic. If one looks at the government of the United States and sees a wasteful, slobbering Jabba the Hutt, then that is a very sane observation coming from a conservative. Conservatives have at least a chance of graduating someday to find higher truth. Liberals are so far gone, there's almost no chance for most of them. That's why the system works much harder to influence the conservative voter, providing them with many levels of graduated animal farms, depending on their level of understanding and questioning. There are 100 more conservative political talk shows across all of radio and television than ones for liberals. Nobody ever bothers to ask why that is. The reason is simple. Liberals don't see any problem with living in slavery under a government that wastes $1 billion a day and eroding the little freedoms that are left. The system doesn't have to work hard to pen Democrats in because they've been trained to love their Jones plantation. At least conservatives complain about shit. Democrats are elephants in the circus yelling to the guy with the whip to come back into their tent. Graduated animal farms are not only about keeping people in a fake left or right paradigm, they exist at all levels of understanding the world and our place in it, like in general, space. What is it? Evolution, finance, primate change, that's monkey change, bot. Every single category has different types of graduated animal farmers. Most provide a mix of lies and truth to keep their audience satisfied so they don't go looking for answers away from those farmers. With somebody like Neil of the Grass-Fed, though, it's all lies. A video channel centered around no space capsule ever landed on the moon, a channel dedicated to that, can be a graduated animal farm, even if it seems like it's speaking for us. It can be on the side of the Not Milk if it never questions the idea of space itself, if you see where I'm going with this. As recently discussed, the Not Milk is thrilled with the debate of we landed, we didn't land, we landed, no cake in a lake. It loves that back and forth. If both parties to the argument believe in space itself, the Not Milk is very pleased if they both believe that one day Captain Kirk will be flying out to visit Vulcan. Protecting the underlying foundation story of what space is all the Not Milk cares about. The foundation that holds up the bridge itself. If arguments get convincing that no, nobody landed, it doesn't love that, I'm sure, but it doesn't really care as long as the person believes in everything else about the way space is presented. Again, the foundation it needs to protect, not the individual aspects. This Not Milk system might be completely prepared to reveal the fact or give back that the notion that nobody went if it feels it needs to. If things don't play out over the next 30 years the way it wants, it will be fine in giving it up as long as it can step forth right away and still cement the notion of what space is. so people don't question the underlying foundation of what's out there. Well, we're going to come clean. Nobody went. But you see, we were in a Cold War, in a race against the Soviets, and we had to do it. And as long as people walk away pissed off about the lie, but still believing that Captain Kirk can one day fly around, that's all it cares about. Here's a very basic example of how the general graduated animal farm system works. An office worker may get tired of reading the dumbed-down news from CNN and USA Today, and that person may seek out the intelligent writing of The Economist magazine. After wasting their money on a very expensive subscription, they now get the news at a more cerebral level, but it's simply the same bullshit with larger words and more sophisticated graphs to fool the reader into thinking they're getting a greater degree of information, which yields more truth. Interesting word, sophisticated, from the root sophist, one who preaches a bunch of bullshit, right from Merriam-Webster, one who preaches fallacious, if I'm getting that right and it's not a sexual term, fallacious reasoning, sophisticated, as one moves to the bullshit of The Economist magazine or The Atlantic magazine for Democrats. I played this pretend I'm smart game myself in 1998. In Los Angeles, working for a big insurance company, I put a whole year's subscription of The Economist magazine on my expense account, and when I began reading it, I felt all proud of myself. I was now superior to the dummy in the next cubicle reading the LA Times. I had The Economist. Boy, I was special. These types of low-level farms promising better information plays on the ego of the reader. That is an integral part of what publications like The Economist, The Atlantic magazine, and The New Yorker are designed to do. If you can make assholes who read it feel superior, that actually acts like another guard over the pen, prohibiting somebody from escaping that level of farm. Nobody wants to stop reading these Mensa publications, for the reading of it, in a way, reflects and props up their own self-worth. In other words, nobody reading The Economist magazine is going to say, screw this, I'm going back to the USA Today. It won't happen. It acts like a guard over themselves because they have to look themselves in the mirror believing they're intelligent. I did it, but somehow I was able to get through it, as you did, or you wouldn't be listening to this. All these intellectual publications do is give more useless information through longer articles and use their big words to prop up the exact same ruse that the dummy at CNN is getting. I remember being all proud of myself after reading my 5th monthly installment in The Economist magazine on Robert Mugabe, the dictator of Zimbabwe, Mugabe in Zimbabwe. That's a song I could tell you all about after I read all that shit and was all proud of myself. The history of Rhodesia, whatever that is, Zimbabwe, squatters, white versus black. I could speak for an hour with no notes on how Mugabe destroyed his country, destroyed the economy. Oh, I was so proud of myself. Well, tell him what he's won, Johnny, for being an expert on 1998 Zimbabwe and its current not-nilk pimp, Robert Mugabe, after spending 20 to 30 hours reading article after article, month after month. What has he won? Squat. Absolutely squat. I waited patiently at work parties and functions, on buses, trains, subways, and street corners for somebody to say, does anybody here know anything about what's happening now in Zimbabwe? And then I could step forward and say, yes, I know, and I'll tell you. But I was denied that. That request never came. The system knows that many people at some point in their lives will start to question a few things. And when that happens, it provides an array of graduated animal farms who act as ranchers over cattle. They are the Jones plantation overseers, making sure their herd doesn't wander too far outside the pen. Each farm that one graduates up to will provide a bit more real information than the lower level, so one believes they finally found the final truth. Of course, none of these farmers will ever present the only truth that matters because they don't know it themselves. The farmers exist to keep people outward, hovering close to the screen, the outer ring of reality, when only their heart center reality bubble can provide real truth. These farmers promise more answers as one gets closer to the outer ring or screen, but all that brings is more breadcrumbs. There are never any answers for a real person out in that direction. The simplest possible way to put it is, they exist to lure people from the real world into a fake world. As you move outward towards the outer ring of reality, things start to break down. Gets more of a presentation, more fake, for lack of better words. In this sense, the graduated animal farms are just the same as everything else the not milk does. That single goal is paramount in everything it does to draw people outward towards the outer ring with their energy and attention. In general, this place isn't very real, but I assure you, if you abandon your heart-centered reality and move out towards its screen, it will get more fake. That's not the most scientific term, but you understand what I'm saying, and we know this is how it works now. So the main strategy of all of the not milk is to lure people outward toward the outer ring with its tricks. It really is that simple. The minions that serve the not milk system as farmers know very little about reality, in my opinion, other than what is contained in their own little bucket. The expertise of a skilled graduated animal farmer is keeping the chickens on the farm as long as possible before a few get restless to seek out more truth in another pen. I think the 95% 5% rule applies to most conservative graduated animal farms. Out of all the people who listen to somebody like Rush Limbaugh when he was alive, for example, maybe about 5% will someday become unsatisfied and seek a provider of greater truth. About 95% will be satisfied and stay there or at a similar level for their entire lives. Sean Hannity, who's still on Fox, would be another farmer on a similar level that Rush Limbaugh was on, as would Glenn Beck and others. In this way, the people on the farm are acting like Cuba Gooding Jr.'s radio character in the movie, repeating the 11th grade over and over again for life. I went through all the graduated animal farms myself, of course, and like Andy, was somehow able to escape. I imagined you did as well. Around 2007, 2008, I watched Glenn Beck on Fox religiously. Caught that show 4 days out of the 5 it was on every week for at least 2 years. Rush Limbaugh, I listened to at noon for around 2 years. Now, Rush was mostly political entertainment, but Glenn Beck presented a lot of real truth, or what we would call real truth, when we were in the bog, about a variety of things and topics that we once believed were important in our truth research. For example, I remember the shows that connected the dots on the companies and foundations that are owned by George Soros and how they were used to drum up trouble in Missouri. Show me the broken glass. It's a show me state. By a certain definition, that is real truth because little George is really involved in the creepy things that Glenn was, quote, exposing on his show. Of course, somebody like Glenn Beck wasn't out to do us any favors. He's a high-level agent of the not milk. The screen is more than happy to give away truth at any level that does not lead to final truth. Whatever these shows or information sources dole out will always be presented with a touch of conspiracy, and that will drive away the normie, even though what is being said about, say, George Soros is actually true. Glenn Beck and little George play on the same team. The farmers will gladly give away mountains of, quote, real information that keeps one distracted and away from the only truth that matters, the truth about themselves and what life is for. One thing that provides credibility to our half page is how none of it is ever discussed in what is called the mainstream. If Don Lemon, one of my favorite people that used to be on CNN, if he presented his take on reality and it was very similar to mine, I'd be damn worried. Maybe they'll do that someday to me in a reverse psychology ploy. Matt, Don Lemon just read your half page on the air, and then he cried. Therefore, Matt, I must abandon you because Don Lemon's saying the same thing. But they have used this very first-grade psychological tactic on our community many times before. What comes to mind is when, say, somebody like me says, this world isn't very real. Then some first-grade truther comes to me and say, look, Matt, Neil of the Grass-Fed over here, Matt, he has this big lecture and all these guests saying the world is a simulation. And Matt, you're saying the same thing. Oh, I'm skeptical of you. Matt, you're saying the world isn't very real. And then Elon Musk over here says, the chances of us being in base reality is 1 in billions. No, we're not saying the same thing. That's where they try to hijack it in the 9th inning. Okay, in the beginning, fine. The world isn't very real. It's an illusion. Neil of the Grass-Fed, his ilk, Elon Musk, the world's an illusion, a simulation. Okay, there's a lot of similarities there, but where do they take it? two roads diverged in a perverted woods, and they chose the Elon Musk, Ray Kurzweil perverted path. They always take it into technology. The movie The Matrix gets you to believe it's all with tubes and wires and computer chips. And Elon Musk, we're not living in base reality, to simulation. They always take it in terms of a sick technology. That's how it's not real. They'll take it, they want people to believe that. I'm saying, yeah, it's not very real, but it's a natural not very real, designed for you to have the spiritual experience. Not that it's a technology or something from the Borg. Neil of the Grass-Fed and Elon Musk are never going to tell you, oh yeah, we say the world isn't very real, but it's highly likely that spiritual timeless beings, or whatever you would call God, that you came from, created this for you. They're never going to go there. They're going to take it down into the realm of Dark City or the Matrix or technology. They're not going to say spiritual beings related to beings like yourself created this place. They're not going to go there. We're both saying the world isn't very real, but then after that, there's severe differences. But the first grade truther, Matt, you're saying the same as Neil of the Grass. No, I'm not saying the same as Neil of the Grass-Fed. And for those that didn't know what I was talking about, but not Tyson, but Bison of the Grass-Fed Bison. Back to our graduated animal farm discussion. Conservatives used to be our brethren 10 years ago, say, before they went insane over things like Q and Trump. Conservatism, if that's a word, used to be the best first-grade class to start out in, to seek a higher truth later. Its foundation is solid. It does not make sense for a government to spend about $6 trillion a year, then go $1 trillion in debt for doing it, and Joe Citizen has nothing to show for all that money spent and wasted. No, don't tell me about roads and highways. They're the state's responsibilities. Mr. Joe Citizen asks, yeah, what do I get for that $6 trillion you just spent? It answers back to Joe Citizen, squat. You get squat. It says, what did you expect to get, sir, for the trillions we just wasted? Did you expect real problems to be solved? Did you expect new medical cures, perhaps? Did you think that level of sick spending should actually cultivate, say, new forms of energy? How dare you expect real progress, sir, from the trillions we have wasted? Like I've talked about a few times recently, the same potholes have existed on Route 422 towards Philadelphia, close to my house. They've been there for 40 or more years, the same exact potholes. The roads to and from Damascus are better than Route 422. And I know I just admitted that it's the state's responsibility, but the average man or woman on the street says, well, that's $6 trillion you waste. Can't we just get a little bit of that so I don't have to go over the same pothole for 40 years? I mean, when I say the average citizen gets nothing, I'm being literal. Unless you're age 65 on Social Security, Medicare, and your doctor's bills, and you go in for a surgery, it's going to be $150,000. Fine. I guess we'll have to call that a benefit. But if you're some 30-year-old, some 45-year-old average Joe citizen, you know what you get for that $6 trillion wasted and spent? When I say squat, I'm being literal. You get nothing. Don't say military defense. Oh my, cooked up and puppet dictators playing roles so Lockheed Martin and Raytheon can get more government contracts. Yeah, that's a good use of our spending. You get nothing. So maybe we could get $50 a year and fix some potholes on Route 422, you son of a beach. Based on what I just said, to be equitable and fair, I have to give both sides. So this Jabba the Hutt government would like to remind everybody listening to the words coming out of my mouth that you should be grateful for how things are managed. Consider this, people in the United States. Your life is far better than the typical Africans, is it not? So shut up. Is 70% of your hometown living in squalor, passing AIDS around your village like gift baskets? No? Then consider yourself fortunate and appreciate your Jabba the Hutt government. Go home, sing your patriotic songs, and shut the hell up. The dark reality knows that conservatism is a baby step in awakening, so it sets up many levels of farms and farmers for angry Republicans to get trapped in. There's an army of conservative graduated animal farmers to cater to all levels of frustration. These conservative farmers will promise change if, as my uncle says, more elections can be won, which is the biggest absurdity of all. An obnoxious radio talk show host named Mark Levin kept tempting us for years with the sugar plum fairy of a constitutional convention, where the states can rise up to put the Washington, D.C. Napoleon in its place. Yeah, we can do a constitutional convention, and then Hannibal Lecter can be put back in his cage legally without any sorts of problems. Oh, yeah, what a sugar plum fairy. And I tuned to that shit for years and was like, oh, we need to do that shit. Of course, it's all talk. Nothing ever happens. It matters not if the talk show host really wants these outcomes, believes in them, or is just a not-no puppet that knows the ruse. It doesn't matter. The same farming process continues over and over, year after year, and most people get stuck on one farm or another. Only a few Andy Dufresnes escape to the next farm to seek a higher level of truth, but when that happens, they don't find no Say Watanejo. They find another Warden Norton and a political Leavenworth. A small percentage of people watching these shows will sense that the current level of truth they're supposedly getting is not the real truth, and they'll flee their pens like Clint Eastwood in The Escape from Alcatraz. The reality is set up to capture the escaped chickens with an even higher level of controlled truth, like, say, Alex Jones or Russell Brand. It is for these reasons that we must be skeptical of all higher levels of truth, like David Icke or Bill Cooper or Jordan Maxwell. And if you're throwing your rubber ducky and screaming at your PC that everybody should be skeptical of me as well, good. It's healthy to keep your guard up. We've all been screwed over too many damn times not to. But guess what? There's a slight difference. I don't sell out no Wembley Stadium the last time I looked. I sit here before you with a cat over there in a frayed sweatshirt. I'm never approached to do anything. I ain't got no Anarchapulco invitation. Every year I cry. Where's my Anarchapulco invitation? I never got one to go meet with Ron Paul. And even if I was doing the TED Talks every other month, I ask you, what higher level of truth would I be holding you back from? If this is a graduated animal farm, the concept is, I want to keep you here with my dumbass jokes or whatever because I want to hold you back from the higher level of truth. So what do we say here? It's a half page. There's a trickster here. We see through the trick. It tries to keep you from self-actualization, achieving your full potential. It has a variety of minions and systems at play in doing this. It's a worry about your self-spiritual journey that's only for you. What higher level of truth would I be holding you back from? The main characteristic of a graduated animal farm and the farmer of that farm is one when you spent time on it, you can then progress but look back and say, oh, I see why they were trying to keep me in that pen. I see the higher truth that animal farmer was trying to keep me from. That's the point. So to call me one, if anybody were to do that, and obviously you wouldn't be here if you think I'm a graduate animal farm, but you always get these little comments. Matt, every time you talk about the graduate animal farms, I must think, are you one too? And just little things that the truthers are prompted to parrot back. You must point to me and say, and identify the truth that I am attempting to hold you back from, which obviously I don't think exists when reality goes down to a half page. The jobs of the trolls that support the Not Nilk against this channel, their job is just to create doubt and skepticism. There's never any substance behind it. It's mad as Joe Rogan. Well, what's the proof? Where's the proof of that? What is that? For some bizarre reason, it actually creates some sort of doubt. Where people, Matt, are you Joe Rogan? Well, I'm still sitting on the damn stoop here waiting for a penny of that 100 million to come in. And by the way, that's if we're both the same. And Matt, it's just like 16 Candles. Who's he? Joe Rogan. He's me. Who's he? I'm him. Well, I ain't seen a penny of it, and he's the dumbass side of this doppelganger if we're the same. I'm the smart one. He's the dumbass. But see, just throw it out there. Plant doubt without any substance behind it. That is the job of the trolls. Those that fall for the trick of the trolls, and there have been some loyal people that have been here that have actually fallen for the trick of the trolls. It's the saddest, most pathetic thing of all time, how somebody could actually fall for that. But hey, it happens. Conspiracy research in the bog is an addiction, like a physical addiction. How many truthers are ready to abandon that? What's so exciting, what's so fascinating in the research? We talk about the boats, our lifeboats getting smaller and smaller as people jump off this boat. It's not attractive to, I think, most truthers to say this research is all part of the general trick. It's all a waste of time. Our boat will get smaller and smaller. Most people in this, quote, truth community are not going to embrace my message for a variety of reasons. The channel hosts aren't going to like it Because all the research, I'm saying, what's the point? It's all for nothing. The people that are addicted to the bog are going to not like it either. So again, our boat gets smaller and smaller. So be it. So in general, over the years, I've listened to a little bit of everybody because we have confidence that we're smart enough to see through the bullshit and take away what's interesting and things that we can use. I don't care what David Icke's role is in all this. I'll still listen from time to time. I'll still listen to a little Manly P. Hall lecture once a year. It's just, hey, I believe I have the discernment to take away what's interesting and to leave what I think is bullshit behind. Examine the information by itself. What is being said, not who's saying it. What does it matter? As I've said many times, if Satan was down here in the park this afternoon giving a speech, I wouldn't be afraid I'd be seduced, but no, I'd go see it. Everybody here should have full confidence at this point in their own ability to discern. We are here. We cannot be fooled any longer by anybody or anyone. You see through every bit of the trick. Therefore, if what I was presenting was a bunch of bullshit, guess what? You would see through it by now. Most of you would. I'd have 4 subscribers, and I'd be trying to offer them picnic lunches. Much of what David Icke, just in general, doesn't resonate with me, no matter how many times he's been correct in other areas, or things I found interesting in listening to him. Okay, I assure you, parading around saying the Queen is some sort of reptilian does not help our cause, no matter what she really is. David Icke is constantly talking about the cabal, positioning it as the final culprit, positioning it as the final bad guy. Now, this is either an intentional deception or he's stuck at lower levels. There is no final boss level that can be handcuffed, like we talked about many times in the past. Focusing on the cabal and the minions on the ground is getting his audience to focus at that level, that lower level, not see the big picture. If you're blaming the players on the ground, the people on TV, the certain groups that, the words I can't use. Matt, you should blame the you-know-whats. If you blame the secret societies, men and women, you're not understanding the big picture of how this reality works. And generally, I don't like the old term, but generally, yes, the spiritual battle that's taking place here. If you're at that level, you're losing it. The Not Nilk does all of this, draws the attention to the individual systems and bad guys. It only has one goal in this regard, to draw your attention, in this case, blame, once again, towards the outer rings. Where attention goes, energy flows. Always an attempt to pull you out of heart center reality. Matt, it's the same exact tactic every single time. Well, yeah, what else is new? The farther out your attention goes, away from your heart-centered reality, the closer to the screen your energy gets, the closer it gets to you. And then when that happens, it allows it to eat, to feed on energy, loosh. The screen, the outer rings have to be somewhat close, or you have to reach out to it for it to feed. You completely cut it off. It's up to you to do that. Then also this cycle repeats on itself, because the farther out you present your attention and go out to shake hands with it, if you move outward towards its outer rings, the propensity to be fooled goes up. Therefore, you give it more energy and it feeds on itself as a sick loop. Again, this is why it must always operate and dance behind a trick. So obviously, I think you should abandon any truth channel that points at individual actors or points at groups or systems or things that on TV points as the final culprit. That truth channel is either intentionally deceiving you or they don't have a damn clue. In summary, on the farmers and farms, the main purpose of the farmers is to hide the only realization in life that matters. That's the goal of the entire Not Nilk as well. They all work towards the same goal. The farmers on the animal farms hide it well because they don't understand it themselves. In the truth community, we've given them too much credit that they have this full understanding. I guarantee you, most of the presenters at the graduate animal farm levels, even certain presidents or candidates for president, they understand their bucket, okay, that this is a presentation, and I'm part, they would say, of this presentation. But they don't understand anything else about how reality works. These levels, at that level minion, they can't understand it. It's not their goal to understand it. They're role players. They're not even real in the same sense that we are. As usual, it comes back to our half page and worry about yourself. That's staying in heart-centered reality, not moving your energy and attention outward towards the screen. To put it more simply, it's understanding ourselves, who we are, and what we're supposed to do in the short time we're here on something called Earth. Your important research into what happened to the side of the Pentagon, see, gets in the way of that. The farmers cry out to you, if you want a full understanding, you must seek the truth out here, close to our screen. You must, Paul McCartney, open the door to us and let us and the not nilk in. And once again, it's the greatest news of all time for real people. Paul McCartney in his song can say, do me a favor, you poor devils. Open the door and let my creeps in. It's completely up to us to let it in. But most people around us, of course, they're running to do me a favor, Paul says. Oh, sorry, sir, Paul, you got to say sir. Do me a favor, open the door. People around us are just running. Who's outside? Oh, Not Nilk, come on in. And then the Not Nilk and its minions just pour into the person's heart-based reality bubble, raid the refrigerator, make a bath for itself, settle in at home, make demands. We did that too for many decades. But we have the ability, once we see through things, to change it up instantly. Now we kick them out, we shut them out, we withdraw our energy and attention. Your family and friends can hover by the screen for their entire lives. Worry about yourself. There's nothing we can do for them and the zombies that this population has become. We've kicked them out, we see through the trick, we've withdrawn our energy. It is literally a half page. So protesting with signs in front of City Hall actually feeds its egregores sweet energy, especially if it comes from real people. It does not fear being loathed and picketed. It loves it. It's a master at directing energy. I don't think the system would allow real truthers who are very close to the highest truths and actually getting somewhere to sell out giant soccer stadiums. It's just me. That's just my belief set. It's one reason I'm skeptical of people like David Icke. Sorry. Putting that aside, the spiritual message of very few of these people that do speak at stadiums, it doesn't resonate with me. And more often than not, they don't have a spiritual message at all. The Queen shedding skin, that's not a spiritual message, all right? Might be very interesting, fascinating, addictive. It's not a spiritual message. That's at the highest level of truth. That doesn't help us in any way. The quote conspiracy they endlessly discuss is not what's important in this life. Once you get out of the bog and you say, shit, I don't have a lot of time left to do in this life what I'm really supposed to do. All of it is the distraction. The system encourages conspiracy investigation because it leads one deeper into the bog. Investigation of oneself is the only thing that Not Nilk dreads. Those who sell out stadiums talk only of conspiracy, not what you need to do for yourself. Well, I haven't listened for several years. If that's the message now, I apologize. But for the many times I've tuned in over 12 years, that has not been the message. All right, if the Queen can regrow a tail and she's that type of entity, that has nothing to do with your worry about yourself journey. What these conspiracy entertainers talk about is dark and it's exciting. It lures many of us in. It appeals to our addictions. I was there too. Sure, but it's time to come out. So if the Queen is a lizard, that's intriguing. That's interesting. But there's nothing there that benefits us in our life journey in receiving that information. Nothing at all. And if our family gets wind that we're listening to that sort of thing, then from their perspective, if we want to keep up any sort of relationship with anybody normal, then that makes it even harder and we become even bigger loons than what we were before. And our personal relationships are further harmed. We know the Queen is not the same as you and me spiritually. It could be a different type of entity or incarnation. It's all we need to know, that a Melvin P type is different. That's all we need to know. We'll never know the exact details while alive in this body. Whether she's reptilian or even a sort of gecko, it doesn't matter. And who could know that these people are lizards for sure anyway, unless we actually place them in a terrarium set to the proper humidity with plastic plants and then observe and see what they do? Many of the people that we call minions probably realize in some sense, of course, they're doing bad or screwing people over. Of course, the higher level sequential, entities, of course, have a bigger, I'm talking about your average minion. Okay, they probably understand how they're screwing people. But how many of our adversaries at the minion level, at that level, see the big picture of their role, what they're actually serving, how they're actually being used by the screen? In my opinion, not many. But by that notion, does the screen or the not milk itself realize how it's being used by whoever designed this reality? Designed for you and I. You know what I think about Hijacked? Don't buy it. Anything worthwhile is difficult. I don't buy the Hijacked. For the mall events and the school events, we would explain away all the tens of thousands involved by, of course, paid and threatened every single time. Nobody ever gets out of line. Nobody ever exposes anything. It's like the Burl Ives silver and gold. Now we have, at a greater reality level, not the paid and threatened, we have hijacked and trapped. Reality's hijacked and you're trapped. Your Saturn Moon matrix is trapped. So hijacked and trapped, silver and gold. Don't buy it. Sorry. Don't buy it for a lot of reasons I've discussed over the years. Not hijacked and trapped. That's what it seems like. So we can have this experience. Or if you really want to get dark, anybody that believes they're completely trapped probably just manifested that on themselves. I believe I have full control and power because I see the trick that it's playing 24/7, 365, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. Matt, does it take a day off? No, it doesn't take a day off. Its trick is that pervasive, minute by minute, decade by decade, century. It doesn't even take a minute off. That's the level of the nature of the trick it has to play. And that tells me, I'm in control. And what I say will manifest. So I'm not gonna manifest on myself in my worry about myself journey. Hijacked and trapped. I'm not gonna do it. You can do it. I'm not going to. That's delusions of grandeur, Matt. All the evidence is here we're hijacked and trapped. I think there's no evidence whatsoever that we're hijacked and trapped. I think the evidence is on the other side. That doesn't mean there's no possibility of a trick of some kind into the moment of death. It means that I don't care what exists because, as I've said many times, we've beaten the trick here. Why wouldn't that level of knowledge, perception, discernment extend into whatever may happen at death? And Tony talks about tricks on the astral and stuff. Even Tony believes in a lot of that stuff and potentially the light trick and everything. But it's very simple. What did we spend our entire lives down here doing, seeing through and beating the trick? You don't think that's going to extend into the next life? Whatever we go back and do with our higher selves, whatever tricks that could come, the moment of death, I'm fully confident I can see through everything now. I'm not worried about it. And if I expect it to come, I will help manifest it. I believe we get what we expect. I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to get out the Tibetan Book of the Dead the night before I die and make sure, what do I do at the blue light again? It's all a bunch of bullshit. On day 10, the blue lights will pop up and make sure you look for the yellow lights. What a bunch of bullshit. I will go into death with full confidence that I've seen through this trick. I don't care what 1,000 people come back and they've had their AD or their NDEs and this and that and they came back into a body. In general, are the masses fooled? In general, yeah, a little bit. If I tap somebody on the street, on the shoulder, and they would have me arrested for assault today. But let's say I could just say, "Hey, sir, can I speak to you on the streets of Philadelphia today? Do you see anything wrong with the presentation that's going on Wolf Blitzer's Situation Room between Gaza and Israel? Is there anything that looks a little strange or odd or things that don't line up with common sense?" And they'd be like, "Well, of course, it's exactly what the news says. You're not one of those people." So we agree almost everybody's fooled. So those people that are fooled go off and have this NDE or AD and they're fooled and they're tricked by archons. So they're fooled in life, but then we every bit of their testimony about their ADD, attention deficit disorder, after death experience, ND, we believe all that because magically some switch is flipped at the moment of death where they have full understanding and perception, but they didn't because they were fooled throughout their entire life. What I believe is if you were fooled your entire life, you will be fooled in death. And if there's some kind of archonic being or trick, you'll fall for that as well. I don't care what the fooled in life tell me about their AD or NDE experience. They were fooled here. Their spiritual essence will be fooled there. You and I are not fooled here. We see through tricks. We see when this presentation comes on the news a week ago as what's being presented in Gaza. We laugh at a lot of it. Why wouldn't we laugh at whatever would come at death? There's nothing to be worried about if you see fully through the trick here. And everybody listening to the words coming out of my mouth has seen through the trick here. So to summarize with Burl Ives, silver and gold, Rudolph, hijacked and trapped, hijacked and trapped. Here's a very simple question. For real people that are getting to a certain level of truth in their investigation, have broken through many graduated animal farms, broken out of many pens, what does your inner knowing tell you, or your inner tuning fork, that the not milk would want us, real people, believing that this whole reality is hijacked and we're trapped? Or do you think it would not want us to believe that the reality is hijacked and we're trapped? I'll give you 3 seconds to think on it. It's real tough. Of course, it wants us thinking and believing the negative, that the whole reality is hijacked, we have no chance, we're trapped, Saturn Moon Matrix. Of course, it wants us believing that. So how does reality actually work? The opposite's true, right? Am I just making this up, or there's no basis for what I'm saying here? Well, Matt, why isn't it all over CNN and then about Saturn Moon Matrix? It's for us, okay? Those that investigate what we do. The masses are so fooled, they don't have to present that the whole reality's trapped and all this stuff and all this darkness to the general population. They do that with the concepts of hell and all that stuff. They don't have to do that to the general masses. The general masses are so fooled, they've got them right where they want them. But for people like us, oh, this group's broken through this pen, this graduated animal farm, we can't hold them. This graduated animal, we can't hold them. They're going on. The group's getting smaller and smaller, but they're progressing to higher and higher level of truths. Now, they're really becoming real boy Pinocchio, real. At that point, do they want us believing that this entire reality is hijacked and we're essentially screwed and trapped at death? Of course, that's what it would want us to believe. Maybe because we need it to manifest it so it gets what it wants. Matt, that seems to make sense or resonate with me, but I need evidence. What evidence do you have, like the 40-year-old virgin evidence? So you have no proof. How do you know it was a man? Because her balls were as big as her Adam's apple. So you have no proof, Matt. You have no proof that it wants us to believe we're hijacked and trapped. No, I have proof. Unlike the 40-year-old virgin could just say the balls were the size of the Adam's apple. I have real proof. Look at the terms we've been given to use. The aluminum Ducati motorcycle, that word. How about controllers and bloodlines and Anunnaki and Archons and Nephilim and all the bad actors in the police lineup? How about Adreno blank, 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 all the darkness? Yeah, it really lines up that they don't want real people to believe that the reality's hijacked by them, and they don't want real people to believe that they're trapped at death. No, they don't. So I know they want me to believe that. So I know that the opposite is true because they operate behind a trick. I mean, am I missing something here? Matt, you're missing a lot. You always take it back to second grade because you can't comprehend anymore. Well, you tell me where I'm going wrong. It plays its same game in the same way every single time. If it's trapped and tricked in darkness and adreno and controllers and bloodlines, and don't you know, but King Charles said he was related to Vlad the Impaler and all this darkness, and then guess what? It's a presentation. It's part of the trick. Nobody's trapped. Nobody's going to be tricked unless that's what you expect. It's a reality that's a difficult ass-kicking spiritually on us. It was meant to be. We signed up for it. Suck it up and enjoy every bit of it. Okay? Everything worthwhile is difficult. It would be not worth anything if we came in here, laid on a beach all day, and there were giant hands stroking us with lube. Thanks for listening.